Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work two jobs just to keep my head above water. So when my sister offered to drive me around for some early Christmas shopping, I jumped at the chance. Gas money is gas money, and I needed to get gifts sorted before the holiday rush made everything twice as expensive. My sister picked me up around noon with her friend riding shotgun. This woman has been hanging around my family for years, drifting in and out of my sister's life like a bad habit. She's 26 with three kids from two different fathers, and for as long as I've known her, she's been obsessed with my older brother. My brother is 33, works overseas contracts, and lives his life exactly how he wants to. No kids, no drama, just work and travel. He's the type who disappears to Thailand for 2 months and comes back with stories about scuba diving and street food. Meanwhile, this woman has spent years trying to get his attention. We hit 3 different stores, and I was checking things off my list when we got to discussing what to get my brother. That's when she suggested I should just get him coal instead of a real gift. When I asked why, she told me he'd been acting like a real jerk lately. I looked at my sister in the rearview mirror, but she was focused on the road. This woman had that tone in her voice, the one that meant she was about to start some drama. She explained how she'd been dropping hints about spending the holidays together, wanting him to get to know her better and maybe meet her kids properly. When the hints didn't work, she finally asked him straight up if he wanted to do Thanksgiving and Christmas together as a real chance to see if they could work. My brother had said no without even thinking about it. I knew exactly why he turned her down. He spends every holiday season traveling. Last year it was Costa Rica. The year before was somewhere in Europe. The man books his flights in August. When I asked if she thought my brother should get coal just because he rejected her, she said it wasn't just the rejection that bothered her. She admitted she'd always kinda thought my brother might be gay, but now she was getting other suspicions about him. The car got real quiet. I caught my sister's eyes in the mirror again, waiting for her to say something. She didn't, but asked what kind of suspicions the woman meant. This woman told us not to play dumb, saying that if an adult man doesn't like adult women, there are only 2 other options. I felt my blood pressure spike. She was implying my brother was either gay or attracted to children because he wouldn't date her. I asked her directly if she really thought my brother was gay or a pedo just because he didn't want to be with her. She insisted it wasn't about her specifically, but that he wouldn't even give them a chance, which seemed weird and not fair. She wondered if he was rejecting her just because she had kids. I told her that if my brother dated her, he'd become an instant father to 3 kids, which is huge responsibility for anyone. She cut me off and started yelling that my brother was 33 years old and needed some damn responsibility. I yelled back that his responsibility wasn't going to be her damn kids. My sister finally spoke up, but only to tell us both to calm down and that she was taking me home. The rest of the ride was dead silent. When I got home, I found my mom and brother in the kitchen. He was showing her pictures from his latest work trip, and they were planning his next holiday adventure. I told them what happened in the car. My mom just shook her head and said something about people having nerve. My brother actually laughed when I explained how this woman had basically called him gay or a pedo because he wouldn't date her. My brother found it hilarious and asked if I told her he was leaving for New Zealand in February. My mom told him not to encourage the mess, but he just shrugged and said if someone wanted to make up stories about why he wouldn't date them, that was their problem because he had places to be. That's my brother for you. Nothing really gets under his skin. He's been dealing with entitled people his whole career, working on international job sites where everyone thinks they know better than everyone else. The next week, my sister called me upset. Apparently, this woman had been spreading rumors around their friend group about my brother. She was telling people he was suspicious and probably had issues with women because he wouldn't give her a chance. My sister said she thought she needed to distance herself from this woman. When I agreed, she admitted the woman had been saying stuff about my brother to other people too, and it was getting embarrassing. I found out later that one of their mutual friends had asked this woman why she was so obsessed with a man who clearly wasn't interested. Her response was that successful men without kids must have something wrong with them. The whole thing came to a head when she showed up at our family's early Christmas dinner uninvited. My sister had mentioned it in passing weeks earlier, and this woman decided to crash it with all three of her kids. She walked in like she belonged there, trying to get my brother's attention and making comments about how nice it would be to have family dinners like this regularly. My brother was polite but distant, the way he always is with people he doesn't really know. After dinner, she cornered him by the coffee maker and told him she thought they'd gotten off on the wrong foot. She really believed that if he got to know her and the kids better, he'd see they could be good together. My brother told her he appreciated that, but he wasn't looking to date anyone right now, since he was actually moving to New Zealand for work in a couple months. She pointed out that he was always traveling for work and asked if he didn't want to settle down and have a real family. My brother told her he already had a real family sitting in the living room. That's when she made her mistake and got loud enough for everyone to hear, demanding to know what was wrong with him and asking if he was gay, wondering why he wouldn't even try with her. The whole room went quiet. My brother just stood there holding his coffee completely unbothered and told her he didn't owe her an explanation for his personal life and that she should leave. My mom stood up from the couch and agreed that leaving was a good idea. When this woman gathered up her kids and walked toward the door, she turned back and told us we'd all regret treating her like this, saying my brother was going to end up alone because he was too picky. My brother called out after her that he'd send her a postcard from Auckland. She slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. We all sat there for a second. Then my brother started laughing and said that whole scene was really something. My sister apologized to everyone and promised she wouldn't bring this woman around family events anymore. She realized the woman had been using their friendship to try to get closer to my brother, and when that didn't work, she turned nasty. Last I heard, this woman was telling people my brother was secretly gay and that our family was stuck up. Meanwhile, my brother got his visa approved and is probably planning his going away party. I'm 21 and still figuring out this whole adulting thing. After spending most of my life in dorms where everything was included in one big payment to the school, managing household bills felt like learning a foreign language. My grandma always told me to keep receipts for everything I spend money on, especially when it comes to shared expenses. She said it would save me headaches down the road, and boy was she right about that. About 2 months ago, I moved in with this guy I met through a housing app. He seemed normal enough during our initial conversations, and the rent was reasonable for our area. The arrangement was simple. He would handle all the utility bills since they were already in his name from the previous tenant, and I would just send him my portion through Venmo each month. For the first few months, everything went smoothly. He would send me a Venmo request with the amount I owed, and I would pay it without question. But then, my grandma's advice started echoing in my head during one of our weekly phone calls. She asked me how much I was paying for utilities, and when I told her, she immediately wanted to know if I was keeping track of the actual bills. My grandma asked if I was seeing the actual statements before paying. When I told her no, that he just sent me Venmo requests, she told me I needed to see those bills. She explained that I could be getting overcharged, or I might need proof for taxes or disputes later. That conversation planted a seed of doubt in my mind. The next day, I approached my housemate while he was making coffee in the kitchen. I asked if he could start sending me the utility bill statements before I paid each month, explaining that my grandma suggested I should keep receipts for everything. His reaction was immediate and weird. His face darkened and he got defensive, asking why and whether I didn't trust him. I explained it wasn't about trust, just wanting to keep better records of my expenses. He seemed angry about such a simple request, telling me whatever and fine in a hostile tone. His attitude struck me as really odd. If someone asked me for a receipt for money they were giving me, I wouldn't think twice about it. But I chalked it up to him maybe having a bad day and left it alone. September came around and I reminded him about the statements when he sent the Venmo request. He sent me photos of the bills, but his attitude about it was so hostile that I felt uncomfortable bringing it up again. The amount seemed reasonable enough, so I paid and hoped things would get easier. Fast forward to last month. October's Venmo request came through but no statements. I figured he just forgot since it had been a while since I initially asked. I sent him a direct message asking him to please send receipts for the bill so I could pay him. I added the thumbs up emoji to keep things friendly. No response. I waited a day thinking maybe he was busy with work or school. The next day, I sent the exact same message. Still nothing. This started to feel really strange. We lived in the same house, saw each other regularly, and he was just completely ignoring my messages about something he knew was important to me. I decided to try different platforms in case there was some technical issue. I called him on Messenger, but he declined the call. I tried Discord, thinking maybe he preferred that platform. Same thing, he declined that call too. Finally, I called his actual phone number. It rang several times before going to voicemail. I left a message explaining I was just trying to get those utility statements so I could pay my portion and asked him to call me back. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, he's been giving me the complete silent treatment. He avoids common areas when I'm around and acts like I don't exist. This isn't even the first time he's done this disappearing act. He pulled similar stunts twice before over minor disagreements, just completely shutting down communication like a child. The whole situation was making me anxious. Was I being unreasonable? Was asking for receipts some kind of social taboo I didn't know about? I started second-guessing myself and wondering if I should just pay the Venmo request without the statements to keep the peace. But then I remembered what my grandma always said about standing up for yourself and keeping good records. Plus, his reaction was so over the top for such a simple request that it made me suspicious. If the bills were legitimate and accurate, why would he have such a problem showing them to me? Yesterday, everything came to a head. I was in the kitchen when he finally decided to acknowledge my existence. He asked if I was going to pay the utilities or not. I told him I would pay them once he sent me the statements like I had asked. He got defensive again, saying he didn't have to show me anything and that I either trusted him or I didn't. I explained this wasn't about trust but about having records of what I was paying for, calling it basic adulting. He accused me of being paranoid and difficult, claiming none of his previous housemates ever asked for this stuff. I replied that maybe they should have. That comment clearly hit a nerve because his face went red and he started yelling about how I was being disrespectful and ungrateful. I stayed calm and repeated that I just wanted to see the bills before paying them. Finally, he snapped and said fine. If I wanted to see the bills so badly, he would show me. He walked off to his room and came back with a stack of papers, throwing them on the counter. I picked them up and started looking through them and my jaw nearly hit the floor. The electricity bill was $67, but he'd been charging me $45 for my half. The internet was $49 total, but he'd been asking me for $35. The water bill was $32, and he'd been requesting $25 from me. I wasn't being overcharged. I was actually being undercharged significantly. He'd been paying more than his fair share for months, and apparently resenting me for it. But instead of just asking me to pay the correct amount, he'd turned it into this whole dramatic situation. I pointed out that these numbers didn't match what he'd been charging me, and that he'd been paying way more than half this whole time. All that anger and defensiveness melted away, replaced by embarrassment and confusion. He said that he thought I might complain if the amounts were higher. I asked him why, instead of just telling me the real amounts, he decided to subsidize my utilities and then get mad at me about wanting to see the bills. He gave some weak explanation about not wanting to deal with conflicts over money, which was ironic considering he'd just created a massive conflict by refusing to show me basic documentation. I ended up paying him the difference for all the previous months, plus the current month at the correct amounts. He seemed shocked that I was willing to pay the higher amounts without complaint. The whole thing could have been avoided if he'd just been straightforward from the beginning instead of playing these weird games. Now he sends me the bill statements without any drama, and we split everything properly. I'm 7 months pregnant with our first baby, and it's been a pretty smooth pregnancy so far. My husband and I have been together for 5 years, married for 2, and we've been trying for a baby for about a year before we got pregnant. We're both in our late 20s, and this is our first experience with pregnancy, so we're still learning everything. My husband works in construction, so he's usually pretty tired when he gets home, but he's been amazing throughout this whole pregnancy. He's always making sure I'm comfortable and helps with everything around the house. The incident happened at our local grocery store last Tuesday evening. It was around 6 in the evening and the store was pretty busy with people getting off work and picking up things for dinner. I was shopping alone because my husband was running late from work and told me he'd meet me there when he could. I was in the cereal aisle trying to reach for something on a higher shelf when this kid who looked to be maybe 8 or 9 years old came running down the aisle. He wasn't with any adult that I could see at first, just running around like he owned the place. The kid stopped right in front of me and started staring at my belly. At first I thought maybe he was just curious about pregnancy, which happens sometimes. Kids don't always understand what they're seeing. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. He told me he was learning boxing and needed to practice his punches. I tried to be polite and told him that was nice, but he should practice on a proper punching bag, not on people. Then this kid looked me straight in the eye and said my belly looked like a perfect punching bag because it was big and round. This kid was literally telling me he wanted to use my pregnant belly as target practice for boxing. I took a step back and told him absolutely not, that he couldn't hit my belly because there was a baby in there. But he said he didn't care and that he needed to practice anyway. That's when he actually got into a boxing stance and started moving toward me aggressively. I put my hands up to protect my belly and backed up more, but he kept advancing. The kid was completely serious about this. I told him loudly to stay away from me and not to dare touch my belly. But this little psychopath wasn't listening. He actually threw a punch aimed straight at my stomach. Thank God my reflexes kicked in and I managed to catch his wrist and deflect the punch before it could land. But the force of blocking him made me stumble backward a bit. That's when I had to physically push him away from me. I didn't hurt him, just pushed him back so he couldn't reach me anymore. But apparently that was the wrong thing to do because that's when his mother showed up. This woman came walking down the aisle like she was ready for war. She was probably in her 40s, with that haircut that screams entitlement, and the attitude to match. She demanded to know what I thought I was doing putting my hands on her son. I explained that her son had just tried to punch my pregnant belly and that I was protecting myself and my baby. She yelled back that he was just a child and didn't know any better. I told her he was old enough to know not to hit pregnant women, and that he had said he wanted to use my belly as a punching bag. Karen accused me of lying and said her son would never do something like that. This woman was defending her kid after what just happened. The kid was standing right there, not even denying what he'd done. I told her to ask him herself, that he had literally told me he wanted to practice boxing on my belly. But instead of asking her son anything, this crazy woman just got more angry. She screamed that she didn't care what I thought happened, and that I shouldn't put my hands on her child. And that's when she slapped me, right across my face, in the middle of the grocery store. The sound echoed through the aisle, and my cheek immediately started stinging. I was so shocked at first. This woman had just assaulted a pregnant woman in public because I defended myself from her violent kid. But apparently my distressed voice during the whole encounter had carried through the store, because my husband had heard me from wherever he was and came rushing over. He arrived just in time to see this woman slap his pregnant wife. My husband didn't even know what the fight was about yet. All he saw was some stranger hitting his pregnant wife. His protective instincts kicked in immediately. Before I could even explain what happened, my husband slapped her back. But my husband is a construction worker with big, strong hands, and when he hit her, it wasn't like the slap she gave me. She went down immediately, and I heard her scream as one of her front teeth went flying. She hit the floor hard and started crying and holding her mouth. Blood was coming out where her tooth used to be. The whole store went silent for a second. Then everyone started talking at once. Store employees came running over, and someone must have called the police because sirens started getting closer. That's when everything really hit me. The stress, the hormones, the fear for my baby, everything just crashed down at once, and I started crying. I couldn't stop shaking. The store manager brought me a chair and made sure I was okay while we waited for the police and paramedics. Several customers had seen the whole thing and were telling the employees what happened. When the police arrived, they talked to everyone involved and all the witnesses. Multiple people confirmed that the woman's son had tried to hit my pregnant belly, that I had only pushed him away in self-defense, and that the woman had slapped me first. The paramedics checked me and the baby, and thankfully, everything was fine. My blood pressure was high from the stress, but that was expected. The police ended up arresting the woman for assault. Her son was picked up by what I assume was the kid's father or another relative. The store's security cameras caught the whole thing. The footage clearly showed her son trying to punch me defending myself, and her slapping me first. She tried to press charges against my husband, but the district attorney declined to prosecute since it was clearly self-defense after she assaulted his pregnant wife first. We found out later that she had to pay for emergency dental work to replace the tooth my husband knocked out, which apparently cost her over $2,000. She also had to pay court fees and fines for the assault charge. My husband felt bad about hitting her afterward, but I told him I was glad he protected me and our baby. I spent 37 years in IT before I retired, and most of that time I loved what I did. About 15 years into my career, I landed a position as a software developer at a mid-sized engineering firm that specialized in commercial and industrial building design. The company had been struggling with their blueprint and architectural drawing management system for years. Everything was tracked on paper forms and filing cabinets, which meant drawings would get lost, approval processes would stall, and nobody could tell where a particular set of plans was in the review cycle at any given time. When a big project had hundreds of drawings moving between architects, engineers, project managers, and clients, the chaos was unreal. Management finally decided they needed a digital tracking system, and they put me in charge of designing and developing it. I spent months interviewing users, mapping out workflows, and building a system that would track every drawing from initial concept through final approval. It was one of those projects where you really felt like you were solving a meaningful problem. When we launched the new system 6 months later, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Users loved being able to see exactly where their drawings were in the approval process and get real-time updates. Since it wasn't a huge company, maybe 200 employees total, most people knew me personally from the development process. Like any new system though, there was definitely a learning curve. People had questions about how to upload files, how to route drawings to the right reviewers, how to interpret the status codes, the usual stuff you'd expect. Now, the company had a help desk that was supposed to handle technical support for all our internal systems. In theory, this new drawing tracking system fell under their responsibility. But here's the thing. I had repeatedly asked management to let me spend serious time training the help desk team on the new system before launch. I'm talking weeks of hands-on training, not just a quick overview. Management kept saying they'd get to it, but somehow it never happened. The help desk got maybe a 2-hour presentation about the system's basic functions, and that was it. No deep dive into the workflows, no troubleshooting scenarios, no hands-on practice with real drawings. So when users started having questions, they quickly figured out that calling the help desk was a waste of time. The help desk folks were perfectly nice people, but they just didn't know the system well enough to provide meaningful help. Users would call them with a question, get put on hold, and then get told someone would call them back. Sometimes that callback happened, sometimes it didn't. Word got around fast, and users started calling me directly. I didn't mind at all, honestly. Helping users was always my favorite part of any job. When someone called with a problem, I could usually walk them through a solution in 5 minutes, instead of them spending half a day getting nowhere with the help desk. This went on for about a month. After lunch, I'd be coding in the morning, then spend my afternoons helping people navigate the system. It felt good knowing the system was actually working for people, instead of creating more headaches. Then Karen from management showed up at my desk one morning. She told me we needed to talk about the support calls I've been taking. When I asked what about them, she explained that I was supposed to be directing all user support requests to the help desk because that's what they were there for. I pointed out that the help desk didn't know the system well enough to help anyone and reminded her how I had asked multiple times to train them properly before launch. Karen dismissed this and said that wasn't the point. She told me we had procedures for a reason and that all technical support had to go through the help desk first. I asked if she really wanted me to send users to people who couldn't actually help them. Karen got stern and told me she wanted me to follow company policy. Starting immediately, I had to direct all support calls to the help desk with no exceptions. I knew this was going to be a disaster, but Karen made it clear this wasn't a request. So I started telling users they had to call the help desk first. The complaints started within hours. The help desk would put people on hold for 20 minutes, then tell them they'd need to research the issue and call back. Sometimes they'd transfer people to other departments that had nothing to do with the drawing system. I watched our system usage start to drop because people were getting so frustrated. Day 2 was worse. I had users cornering me in the hallway begging for help, and I had to keep telling them to call the help desk. One of the senior architects actually shouted at me in the break room. He said the situation was ridiculous because he'd called the help desk 4 times about the same drawing and nobody could tell him why it was stuck in review. I apologized and told him I had to follow company policy. The senior architect got even more upset and said company policy was going to kill the project if people couldn't use the system. By day 3, the complaints had reached the executive level. The drawing system that had been working great was now seen as a major problem, not because of the software, but because nobody could get help when they needed it. That's when Karen showed up at my desk again. But this time she wasn't alone. The IT director and the head of engineering were with her. The IT director told me they needed me to resume providing user support for the drawing system. I asked what happened to the company policy Karen had insisted I follow. Karen looked uncomfortable and said they determined that this situation required some flexibility. I pointed out that what they'd really determined was that her policy didn't work. The head of engineering stepped in and said they just needed the system working smoothly again. He asked if I could help the users. I agreed but told them this time we were going to do it right. I explained that I needed dedicated time to properly train the help desk team before I went back to my regular development work. The IT director said I could have whatever I needed. I laid out my requirements: 2 weeks of their time, 4 hours a day, hands-on training with real scenarios. Not a presentation, but actual practice. Karen looked like she'd swallowed something sour, but she nodded her agreement. The training sessions were intense but effective. By the end of those 2 weeks, the help desk team actually understood the system well enough to solve most common problems. They even started catching issues I hadn't thought of and suggesting improvements. Karen tried to take credit for the improved support structure in her next presentation to management, but everyone knew exactly what had happened, and word got around about how her rigid policy adherence had nearly tanked a successful system launch. From then on, whenever someone proposed a new policy that ignored practical realities, people would bring up the drawing system incident. Karen's credibility on operational matters never quite recovered, and she eventually transferred to a different division. The drawing tracking system became one of the most successful internal tools the company ever implemented. I started baking when I was 12 after finding my grandmother's old recipe box in the attic. Since then, I've spent countless hours perfecting techniques and experimenting with flavors. My bedroom walls are covered with pictures of elaborate cakes I've made, and my phone is full of baking videos I watch constantly. When my 16th birthday came around, there was no question about who would make the cake. I've been planning it for weeks. A 3-layered chocolate hazelnut creation with homemade praline between the layers and silky chocolate ganache coating. The party was small, just close family and my 3 best friends from school. Nothing fancy, just the people who actually mattered to me. I'd spend the entire morning putting the finishing touches on my cake, carefully piping decorative swirls around the edges and adding the final dusting of cocoa powder. My cousin would be coming, and he has a severe nut allergy. I love that kid, so I made sure to bake a separate batch of vanilla cupcakes using completely different equipment. I even bought new mixing bowls to avoid any cross-contamination. Each cupcake was topped with his favorite blue frosting, and I put them on a completely separate table with a big sign that said nut-free zone. When my aunt arrived with my cousin, I immediately showed them the special cupcakes. I told my cousin that I'd made them just for him, vanilla with blue frosting since that was his favorite. His face lit up when he saw them, and he gave me a huge hug. Everything seemed perfect. About an hour into the party, just when I was getting ready to cut my cake, my aunt pulled me aside into the kitchen. Her expression was stern, the kind of look she gets when she's about to lecture someone. She demanded that I take my cake off the table immediately. I asked her why, completely confused by the request. She claimed the cake was making my cousin feel excluded and said I should serve only the allergy-safe cupcakes instead. She told me to look at him just standing there while everyone gathered around my cake. I looked into the living room where my cousin was happily playing with my friend's little brother, completely unbothered by anything happening near the cake table. I pointed out that he had his own special cupcakes that I'd made just for him, and that the main cake was for everyone else to enjoy. My aunt wasn't satisfied with that answer. She started going on about what would happen if someone ate my cake and then kissed him on the cheek, or if there were crumbs on their hands. She accused me of being completely reckless with his safety. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I dealt with his allergy before and knew how to be careful. I explained that I understood her concerns, but that I kept the cupcakes completely separate. I told her about using different tables, different utensils, and how everything was clearly marked. I emphasized that I'd been very careful about handling his allergy properly. She crossed her arms and shook her head. She said my precautions weren't good enough and gave me an ultimatum. Either the cake went away or they were leaving. Before I could respond, she stormed past me into the living room. I watched in horror when she grabbed my cake plate and started carrying it toward the door that leads to the garage. When I asked her what she was doing, she said she was putting it somewhere safe where it couldn't hurt anyone. That's when my mom appeared, probably wondering why someone was walking through the house carrying a birthday cake. She asked my aunt what exactly she thought she was doing with my birthday cake. My aunt explained that she was protecting her son because the cake had nuts in it, and I refused to put it away. My mom reminded her that I'd made special cupcakes for my cousin, that the cake was clearly labeled, and that I'd taken every precaution. She told my aunt to put the cake back on the table. My aunt refused, saying she wouldn't compromise her child's safety just because I wanted to show off some fancy cake. My mom's voice got that dangerous quiet tone she uses when she's really angry. She told my aunt that this was my 16th birthday party and that I'd spent hours making that cake. She said if my aunt couldn't respect the boundaries we'd set up to keep everyone safe and happy, then she needed to leave. My aunt slammed my cake back onto the counter. She announced that they were leaving and called for my cousin to come say goodbye. My cousin looked confused and upset. He said he hadn't gotten to eat his special cupcakes yet and reminded everyone that I'd made them blue just for him. My aunt told him they'd get cupcakes somewhere else and ordered him to say goodbye. The poor kid started crying when she dragged him toward the door. He kept looking back at the cupcakes I'd made, reaching for them while his mom pulled him away. He kept saying he wanted the blue ones because I'd made them special. My heart broke watching him cry, but my aunt was determined to make her dramatic exit. She slammed the front door so hard that a picture frame rattled on the wall. The room went quiet for a moment. Then my best friend broke the tension by asking if we could finally eat some cake. Everyone started laughing and the weird atmosphere disappeared completely. My mom hugged me and told me I'd handled everything perfectly. My friends crowded around the cake, complimenting the decorations and asking about my technique. When I finally cut into it, the layers were perfect. The hazelnut praline had set just right, and the ganache was smooth and rich. Everyone raved about how delicious it was, and I felt proud of all the work I'd put into it. People kept asking for seconds and wanted to know how I'd gotten the ganache so shiny. Later that evening, my mom told me my aunt had called to complain about how we treated her. Apparently, we were being unreasonable and putting her son at risk. My mom had simply told her that she was welcome back anytime she was ready to respect other people's efforts and boundaries. 2 days later, my cousin called me himself. Turns out his mom had told him I didn't want him at the party because of his allergy. I explained what really happened and promised to make him blue cupcakes again soon. He was just happy to know I hadn't been mean to him. He told me his mom had been wrong and that he knew I always tried to include him. My 16th birthday ended up being exactly what I wanted. Good food, people who cared about me, and a cake that tasted amazing. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.